by the likes of CLR James, Amy Ashwood Garvey, Jomo Kenyatta, and a host of other Pan-Africanists who came to the side of the Ethiopians when Ethiopia was under attacked by Italy during World War II. So there's a long history of Africans abroad coming to the side of Africans at home, institutionally, also individually. Some of you are probably familiar with the remarkable Martinican Frantz Fanon, who was at the side of the Algerians as they battled, they waged a violent resistance against French colonialism, or the likes of our brother George Padmore of Trinidad, who was at the side of the Ghanaians that organized, worked with Kwame Nkrumah to organize the 1958 All-African Peoples Conference, the first Pan-African conference following the Manchester 1945 conference to be held on the African continent, on African soil. So I say that to say that Friends of the Congo as an institution and the individuals within the institution are firmly ensconced in that Pan-African tradition where we see defending the base, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o lays out in his latest book, is been a long tradition on the part of Africans abroad, right? So Friends of the Congo is in that tradition. And we've been on that path as an institution for the past quarter century, with a particular focus on the Democratic Republic of the Congo, not solely focused on the Congo, but particularly focused on the Congo. And I'll lay out why we've had that particular focus for a quarter century. So in being on that path, we have really two overarching aims. One is to raise global consciousness about what is transpiring in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we do that through a series of actions and activities. We're in the midst right now of the Breaking the Silence Speakers Tour, which runs from February 1st, first day in Black History Month, the birthday of Langston Hughes, who's a major proponent of the Congo, Lumumba, run from February 1st right through July 2nd. July 2nd is the birthday of Patrice Lumumba himself, and also Medgar Evers. Both of them were born on the same day in the same year, July 2nd, 1925. So Breaking the Silence Speakers Tour is one of the key ways in which we raise consciousness, engage in teach-ins and groundings, and we do that in the spring. We have in the fall a global teach-in called Congo Week. This year will run from October 19th through October 26th, and people can check out congoweek.org to be engaged. And it's a global teach-in where we bring together, we gather people from different parts of the world to tune in, to engage in a dialogue and exchange with organizers on the front line in the Congo, whether it's in the rainforest, indigenous communities, or at the epicenter of the conflict in the east, or young people organizing in the west in Kinshasa city, 14 million people, inhabitants the size of New York, or in the south of the country, in the mining areas, at the bottom of the cobalt and copper supply chain. So those are really two major ways in which we fulfill up on our mission, that part of our mission of raising global consciousness. And of course, we write articles, do interviews, share information on our social media channels, at Congo Friends. If you want to tune into us at Congo Friends, on Instagram and X or Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. You'll find us at Congo Friends. So, raising global consciousness. The second aim of our institution is to provide support to those on the front lines, those I just mentioned to you, in all four corners of the Congo. In the east, conflict; in the north, rainforest; in the west, cities; in the south, in the mining areas. And we do that through a collective of local organization called the Basanja Coalition, Basandja, Basanja Coalition. So the work that we do in Congo Week and Breaking the Silence Speakers Tour and speaking as we're speaking with you today and engaging people on social media is to build a global constituency, really in the spirit of Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba, in his last letter to his wife Pauline, before he was assassinated, speaking to Congolese people, and he said to the Congolese people, he said, we're not alone. Africa, Asia, free and liberated people from every corner of the world will be found by your side. So we're fulfilling on that mission and that prognostication that Lumumba laid out in his last letter by mobilizing a global constituency to support frontline organizations in the Congo, and in this particular case, the Basanja Coalition. So that's Friends of the Congo in terms of the work we do, our mission, and our centering in the Congo. So why do we center the Congo? Why does Congo even matter to the extent that it does? Why a Friends of the Congo? Well, people of African ancestry. If you look at our trajectory over the past half a millennia, past 500 years, where going back to the early 1500s, where the extractive process began by European powers, where they trafficked Africans from the continent to the Americas, primarily. Well, Congo looms large, right? There's Emory University, they have a database where they study the so-called transatlantic slave trade. They study the patterns of extraction of human beings by European powers. And almost half of the Africans, according to their database, and UNESCO has similar data as well, almost half of the Africans, specifically 4 out of 10, were trafficked from the Congo Basin, right, to the Americas. So at the beginning of Europe's extractive process, which began with the extraction of human beings, Congo was central, right? And it was critical, that extraction of human beings was critical to advancing capitalism, to be served on the plantation systems of capitalist enterprises in the Americas, cotton farming and the sugar cane, primarily in the Caribbean. And if you look at works like Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, or even Harvard professor Sven Beckett, who recently wrote The Empire of Cotton, or the Cotton Empire, you see that fundamental to the advancement of capitalism at that point in 1500s, 1600s, 1700s was the slave system, right? There is no capitalism as we know it without that labor and intellect that came out of Africa. And when we saw the advancement, see capitalism advance to this industrial stage in the 1800s, we see Europe doubled back, deepened its engagement in Africa primarily through the Berlin Conference, which incidentally was also called the Congo Conference, 1884, 1885, presided over by Otto von Bismarck, some 14 European nations, including the United States, right, where the European powers gathered to establish their spheres of influence on the African continent to carve up what they call, or Thomas Pakenham called in The Scramble for Africa, a book that I highly recommend, in spite of its racist undertones, establish their spheres of influence on the African continent so that they wouldn't go to war against each other over this magnificent pie. Right? And really good book to get a sense of that process and the extent to which European powers were particularly concerned about not going to war against each other in order, as they captured the continent. David Levering Lewis, probably the foremost biographer on W.E.B. Du Bois, wrote a really good book entitled The Race to Fashada, right? So this Berlin conference, this Congo conference that occurred 140 years ago, was particularly devastating for people in the heart of the African continent, the Congo, because Congo, coming out of the conference, was given to King Leopold II of Belgium as his own personal property, his own private property, and he owned it outright. And in return for that ownership, they created what you can call free trade zone for Europeans, where they call it the Congo Free State, where you can have free movement, free commerce, free trade. European powers had that ability to move in this space, which would ostensibly serve as an outpost for the extraction of natural resources to power Western industries. So we go from human resources from 1500s to 1800s to natural resources, all in the same logic, right? Of serving Europe, of powering Europe, of advancing capitalism, and being at the bottom of that chain that it advances the technology that the West would develop. So the bicycle automobile with Dunlop developing the pneumatic tire in Europe, that paved the way for the automobile and for the bicycle and auto industry. And in order for that industry, those industries to thrive, they needed the natural resource to match the technology, right? And rubber was was a key resource at the time. So from 1885 to 1908, a 23-year period, we saw the King of Belgium, King Leopold II, extract rubber, and there's ivory and other resources, right, to power these burgeoning industries in the West. And we see that in this process, this 23-year period, the Congolese population was decimated by half, right? Estimated 10 million people perished as the king extracted the rubber, right? Well documented in a book by Adam Hochschild, King Leopold's Ghost. I highly recommend that work as well. And as the king was extracting these resources, and Congolese people living in a death chamber of slavery, where if they didn't meet the quota of rubber, their hands would be chopped off, and they're just the most devastating form of, we're not even at the stage of colonialism yet, right? This is ownership. The Congo is unique among African countries in that before it was colonized, it was owned. It was property. The king owned everything, right? And his actions were so egregious that it elicited an international outcry. And at the forefront of this international outcry were Africans abroad, right? We're talking about the likes of William Shepherd and Lucy Gant, Presbyterian missionaries who were documenting the atrocities that were taking place under King Leopold II of Belgium. Now remember, when European powers entered into the continent in this phase of their development of Europe's advancement, they justified it under what they call the three C's, right? They say we're going into Africa to bring commerce. We're going into Africa to bring Christianity. We're going into Africa to bring civilization, right? So commerce, Christianity, and civilization are the three C's of European colonization of the continent. So these missionaries, Africans abroad, documenting, saying there's atrocity and saying, no, you're not bringing civilization, you're extracting resources while destroying the local population. And William Shepherd did this. His documentation of what was unfolding would be picked up by the likes of Mark Twain, who wrote King Leopold's Soliloquy. You had figures like Booker T. Washington, who wrote a remarkable essay, Cruelty in the Congo. He was part of a movement called the Congo Reform Association, established by two Europeans, Roger Casement and Ed Morel, which was leading a global campaign to end the ownership of the Congo, end King Leopold's ownership of the Congo. And then he had a remarkable figure right there out of who wound up in Ohio by the name of George Washington Williams. Those of you in Ohio are probably familiar with George Washington Williams. He was a Civil War hero. He served in the Ohio, coming out of the Civil War, he served in the Ohio legislature, served in the Ohio legislature, and also went to Howard University and a few other universities in the Northeast, and is often referred to as the first African-American historian of note. So in 1890, he went to the Congo to see if what the king was saying is true, or the reports that were coming out from the likes of William Shepherd was more akin to the reality. And when he got there and saw what was happening, George Washington Williams said that what's unfolding in the Congo is akin to crimes against humanity, right? In a long letter that he wrote to King Leopold II of Belgium. His work and his life is documented by another remarkable African-American historian of note, John Hope Franklin. And he wrote a book called The Biography of George Washington Williams. And Hollywood took, as Hollywood does, took his story and distorted it, right? I don't know if you all saw the last Tarzan movie that came out of Hollywood, a blockbuster production, Tarzan, a fictional character. So this fictional character, Tarzan, had a sidekick, and the sidekick happened to be a real-life hero in George Washington Williams. Samuel L. Jackson played George Washington Williams in the latest Tarzan movie, where Hollywood took African history and flipped it upside down. So it'd be like producing a movie with about Muhammad Ali, about boxing, and put in Rocky as the hero and Muhammad Ali as a sidekick to Rocky, along those lines. But in any case, George Washington Williams was one of the African-American figures who were at the forefront of combating the king. And they were ultimately successful in rescuing, quote unquote, the Congo from King Leopold II of Belgium. However, the Congo was not turned over to the Congolese people, right? They were successful in 1908, and instead of Congo being turned over to the Congolese people, it was turned over to the Belgian state, right? Where the Belgian state ruled it as an outpost, a colonial outpost. This is where Congo enters into colonialism, under colonial rule, 1909 to 1960. And the resistance continued. There's resistance on the ground, resistance against colonialism. It's well documented in a book by Georges Nzangola Ntalaja, a remarkable Congolese scholar. He wrote a book, The Congo from Leopold to Kabila, a people's history. It's akin to Howard Zinn's work, People's History, the United States. But so the resistance, Congolese resistance, was strong because they wanted Congo for themselves, for the benefit of Congolese. But the global community turned Congo over to the Belgian state. You had one figure who rose up. It was influenced by Marcus Mosiah Garvey. His name is Simon Kimbangu. When these African American missionaries go to the Congo, they bring Garvey literature with them. And it was, it was prohibited, it was illegal. But they were able to get it through, and they got it through to folks in the Congo. And Kimon Simbangu was engaged in reading of Garvey literature. And he that influenced, in part, his resistance to the Belgian colonialism. His resistance was so fierce that he was sentenced to death for sedition, wound up commuting that death sentence, and he's remained in prison longer than Nelson Mandela did, resisting apartheid. He was in prison for almost 30 years. And today you have followers of Kimbangu still in the Congo under faith entity called Kimbanguist. So there's resistance, right? So two dominant themes coming out of the late 1900s into the late 1800s into the early 1900s was that design, that initial design, much like the rest of Africa. The countries that we see, the 54 or 55 countries we see on the continent today, were created by European powers, right? And with a particular intent and blueprint, especially for the Congo, designed by Europeans for extractive purposes. That's the blueprint of the Congo, right? That's the modern Congo, designed not by Congolese, but by Europeans for extractive purposes, ostensibly to power and enrich European industries, particularly the elite, right? So what Kimbangu represented was a disruption of this design, a breaking, a smashing of this design by Europe over the heart of, that got the heart of the African continent trapped. So coming in the wake of Simon Kimbangu, we have figure like Patrice Emery Lumumba, right? Who detested this form of colonial rule, right? And his acute resistance to it was powered by that conference I told you about that was headed by George Padmore, the All African Peoples Conference in 1958, where Patrice Lumumba and his comrades attended. And Lumumba met the likes of Fanon and Nkrumah and befriended Nkrumah, and his participation in that conference radicalized him, right? Really, it's out of that conference that Lumumba deepens his understanding of the centrality of Congo to Africa overall, his Pan-African vision, right? So Lumumba had gone back to the Congo after the 58 conference, radicalized and mobilizing Congolese, along with other Congolese. Joseph Kasavubu, who would become Congo's president, was also a staunch anti-colonialist, in spite of his record after 1960. So the Congolese were successful in gaining their independence in 1960. Lumumba's party, Congolese National Movement, Mouvement National Congolais, MNC, in French, won the parliamentary elections. As a result of winning the elections, they were able to choose a prime minister, and they chose, of course, their leader, Patrice Lumumba. The party was established in 1958, just 2 years prior to independence. And a few months before Lumumba went to Ghana, to Accra. Today people talk about a free Congo and free Congo movement. When Lumumba and his comrades established the Congolese national movement, he said to his comrades, comrades, we're here, and we're here for one purpose mainly, and that is a free Congo, right? So when we talk about free Congo is firmly ensconced in Lumumba, in Simon Kimbangu, and in the undertaking of Congolese to smash the original design of the Congo. That original design for the Congo to serve as an outpost for the extraction of resources that would power the West, right? Where was the rubber that was used for the auto and bicycle industry, the copper for the bullets in World War I, the industrial diamonds for heavy machinery and drill bits in World War II, the uranium that was used in the Manhattan Project for that ultimately developed the atomic weapons that were dropped on our brothers and sisters in Japan, where Congo was the main source for that uranium. All of that they're saying, Lumumba was now saying, this wealth that's been used for war, for destruction, for oppression, we want to control it. It's ours. It's on our ancestors' land, for the benefit of Congo, right, and for the benefit of the Pan-African Project, as they had established with the likes of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea and Modibo Keïta of Mali. This project of the United States of Africa, this wealth that's found in our part of the African continent, the wealth that European geologists and geographers at the dawn of the 20th century said is a geological scandal, right? That's how Europeans describe the Congo, as a geological scandal, meaning that there's so much wealth packed into this space that is scandalous, right? So many minerals that if you fly a plane low enough over the Congo, the instruments start gyrating, right? Because of the minerals that are in the ground, right? So this didn't sit well with the European powers, particularly the Belgians, right? And it certainly didn't sit well with the United States. United States, who've been involved in the Congo since its inception. The United States was the first country in the world to recognize Congo under the ownership of King Leopold II. At the same time, when the Haitians, under Toussaint Louverture, secured their freedom by defeating the French and a host of other European powers, the U.S. took 6 decades to recognize Haiti as a state. But it didn't take them any time to recognize Congo, the Congo Free State under King Leopold II of Belgium. So here comes the United States back in the scene in full force. When Lumumba was elected and made his declaration, what the United States response was to unleash the largest covert action in the world, to overthrow the democratically elected leader of the Congo, which the Congolese people, whom the Congolese people embraced. And they embraced the principles articulated by Lumumba and his Congolese national movement, principles of African nationalism, the putting aside of regional differences, putting aside of tribal or ethnic differences in the interest of the nation as a whole and in the interest of the continent, right? Because Lumumba was a nationalist and a Pan-Africanist. And that's the vision he articulated. That's the solidarity. That was the solidarity that he received from the likes of Ahmed Sékou Touré, who dispatched one of his most ardent organizers, a remarkable sister by the name of André Blouin, whom many of you have probably seen lately in soundtrack to a coup d'etat. André Blouin, one of the most remarkable or one of the key organizers of Pan-African organizers of the 20th century, who is born in the Central African Republic and eventually wound up in Guinea with Ahmed Sékou Touré, is instrumental in organizing the Guinean masses to reject de Gaulle of France and the referendum that France put to its colonies in 1958, where Guinea and the Guinean people said, no, we don't want to be a part of France Afrique. We don't want to be a part of the sphere of influence. We want our total independence. And the reason why Touré was able to say no is because of likes like Andre Blouin and others who organized the Guinean masses to reject the French, to reject France Afrique. So it was this remarkable organizer that Nkrumah and Sékou Touré dispatched to the Congo to work with Patrice Lumumba, and she eventually became his chief of protocol and speechwriter. So Lumumba's undertaking was a Pan-African one. You know, Félix Moumié of Cameroon was also tapped to go support Lumumba. And the United States understood this, right? And they mounted the largest covert action against the Congolese people. According to their own documents in 2014, the State Department published the declassified documents that lays this all out. There's a gentleman from the Council on Foreign Relations named Stuart Reed. He's documented all of that in a work entitled The Lumumba Plot. Right? But in looking at Patrice Lumumba and the U.S., we see that a key figure arose in Larry Devlin, the chief of station of the CIA, who was responsible for the overthrow of Lumumba. And he lays out in a book that he wrote, Chief of Station Congo, how he overthrew this democratically elected leader, how he corrupted the Congolese elite, how he manipulated the Congolese elite to move the battle from the parliament into the streets. Because you put Lumumba in front of a group of politicians, friend or foe, he was remarkably persuasive in terms of the art of the language and the argument. And the CIA was dumbfounded by this. And Devlin says in his book, we couldn't compete with him. They even paid off politicians in debates in parliaments to go against Lumumba. And the politicians kept the money and stuck with Lumumba. So Devlin said, we have to move this into the streets. He was a dangerous man. And when they ultimately overthrew Lumumba, Devlin stated that, you know, we had no choice. We had to overthrow him because according to Devlin and the CIA and the US government, if they were to lose Congo at that juncture, not only would they have lost Congo, but they've lost all of Africa. So here you see the battle being played out, right? Where you had Nkrumah, you had Touré, you had Keita, all saying that we need Congo for the advancement of the continent. And Nkrumah lays that out in his book, The Challenge of Congo. And then you have the CIA, the US, the Belgians, the Europeans saying that we got to get rid of this guy so that it doesn't serve as an engine for the development of Africa, like Cheikh Anta Diop lays out in his book, the Federated States, right? So when we talk about Congo, we see that we're not just talking about Congo, whether from its inception, the modern inception, 1884 to 1885, to 1960, the overthrow of Lumumba and ultimate assassination of Lumumba on January 17, 1961. It's not solely about the Congo, but it's about the future of the African continent, right? It may not be to the level as, Chairman Mao said, right? Chairman Mao famously stated that he who controls the Congo controls the world, right? But it certainly is to the practical level that Nkrumah lays out in The Challenge of the Congo, where Congo would serve not only as the industrial engine for the development of Africa, per Cheikh Anta Diop, but also the capital of the United States of Africa. Because of its centrality to the continent, the continent is likened to a body, Congo is the heart, sitting in the middle, straddling the equator. As Malcolm often talked about the strategic imperative of the Congo in his speeches. He would lay it out. Probably no other Black US figure in the last 60 years have laid out the centrality of the Congo, the importance of Congo to the future of Africa, as Malcolm has, where a country the size of Western Europe, right, current day, bordered by 9 other African countries. So you can project power better from the Congo than anywhere else on the continent to different parts of the continent. So we're talking about a country that's strategically located in the heart of the African continent. For all intents and purposes, the fulcrum on which a continent swings. As Thabo Mbeki said, that he flatly stated that there is no new Africa without a new Congo, right? So we have the friends of Congo, the allies. And then we have the foes of Congo, the enemies, recognizing the centrality of Congo to the future of the African continent and stating so, right? In their actions, in their policies. So the United States took the lead. The UN was involved. France was involved. Of course, Belgium. Local elites that were sycophants, that were corrupted. The CIA created this group called the Binza Boys, or the Binza Group, which is a corrupt group of politicians. It's a type of African leadership, right? Which they utilized to overthrow the revolutionary democratic leadership of Patrice Lumumba. And not only did the CIA do this, and now when we talk about the overthrow of the democratically elected leader of the Congo, we're not saying it's exceptional, it's consistent, right? Because the United States overthrew Mossadegh in Iran in the 50s, and Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, and Allende in Chile. So Lumumba is in this snare, let's say, in the crosshairs of CIA, US coup d'etats and overthrow across the global South, right? However, Lumumba's may have been the most significant of the 20th century, because not only the United States overthrow Lumumba, but then they install a dictatorship of the Congolese people in Joseph Desiré Mobutu. And then they maintain that dictatorship for 3 decades, right? When Mobutu was overthrown in 1997. So even Stuart Reed, Council on Foreign Relations, right? Lumumba plot, even he is, if you know the Council on Foreign Relations, it's like, it's an institution that serves the empire, provides the intellectual arguments for, full spectrum domination on the part of the United States. Even he says the Congolese deserve reparations for what the role the United States have played in destroying the country, overthrowing and assassinating its leader, its first democratically elected prime minister, installing a dictatorship over the Congolese people for three decades, right? And you have Stuart Reed and Lumumba plot. I highly recommend you read a few other books to complement that, because that's just an accounting, for the most part, of released State Department document, but certainly the assassination of Lumumba by Ludo DeWitt, and most recently, White Malice by Susan Williams. Susan Williams said in White Malice, she set out to write a book on the relationship between Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba. And she said the CIA kept getting in the way. She said everywhere she turned in her research, to research about Lumumba, research about Nkrumah, the CIA was there. So our editors told her, just write a book about, the CIA's role in Ghana and in the Congo. So in any case, the Congo that we see today, right, if we're to believe Stuart Reed and others, is directly linked to US intervention on the part of the Central Intelligence Agency, on the part of the US government, right? So if you want to understand what's unfolding in the Congo, you ought to be present to the role that the United States has played. Since Lumumba, there hasn't been one leader that's ascended to power in the Congo as head of state without the sign-off of the United States. Even the current leader, right? Because the current leader was first elected in 2018, Felix Tshisekedi, but he didn't win the elections, right? He ascended to power through a deal with a former leader, Joseph Kabila, deal with the United States and other African leaders, that this guy, Felix Tshisekedi, he's pliable, he will respond to our interests, and we can count on him. So we're going to make him president, right? And that's among the Congolese elites, the African elites, and certainly the European elites. So 3 decades of the United States supporting a dictatorship. So what we've had to this point, if we look at the sweep of history in terms of the heart of the African continent, we're talking about slavery, we're talking about colonialism, we're talking about overthrows, we're talking about assassinations, we're talking about imposition of dictatorships, right? And even as we get into the 1990s, and the rationale that the United States used for all of this from 1960s to present is that we're in the battle of the Cold War. And we're in a Cold War battle. They even claimed that Lumumba was a communist, and he had to defend himself, saying, no, I'm not a communist. I'm a nationalist. I'm a Pan-Africanist, right? So all of this to control the heart of the African continent, and controlling the heart of the African continent, by virtue of you controlling the heart of the African continent, you control the continent as a whole, the future of the continent. So, but at the end of the Cold War, you'd think, that the U.S. would back off. No, you had movements, rising up throughout Africa, challenging the one-party states, most famously in Benin and in Congo, they had the same, where they have national sovereign conferences where people were getting rid of the dictators that were backed by the West and trying to chart their own course. And this was the same in the Congo. They had national sovereign conference. And the people were putting pressure on Mobutu. It's time for him to go. But United States was skeptical and concerned because they couldn't be certain they could control what kind of leadership would come out of a people's movement. So what they decided to do in the final analysis was to back an invasion of the Congo by proxies, by agents of neocolonialism, as Thomas Sankara would put it. And two key agents of neocolonialism on the African continent, Yoweri Museveni, president of Uganda, and Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda. And they've received financing, training, equipment, intelligence from the United States and European powers as they've waged a 30-year war of aggression and plunder against the Congolese people. They were successful in overthrowing Mobutu in 1997, May of 1997. They installed a leadership who was a Lumumbist, a leadership that didn't have its own military or any of that. Lumumbist by the name of Laurent Kabila, and he became president of Congo in 1997, and with the support of the military of Rwanda and Uganda, Angola was involved to some extent for its own regional and national interests. And Laurent Kabila said, okay, you've gotten to help us get rid of the dictator, now you get out, right? Because at the time, Rwanda had taken one of its leaders, James Kabarebe, and installed that person as the head of the Congolese military. That didn't sit well with Laurent Kabila, but Laurent Kabila didn't have his own military. He got to power primarily because of Rwanda's and Uganda's military. But in any case, he said, well, y'all gotta go. Like, you're Rwandans, you're the head of the military, you're infiltrating our institutions, we're a sovereign nation, you gotta go. So that didn't sit too well with the folks in Kampala, in Uganda, or the folks in Kigali, in Rwanda. So what they did was they invaded again. This time to overthrow the leader that they put in power, right? Laurent Kabila. And they invaded in 1998. And what Kabila did was he reached out to folks in the Southern African Development Community, SADC, for support. You had Mugabe in Zimbabwe. He was heading up the military arm of SADC. You had Dos Santos in Angola. And they said, okay, we're going to come to your side. Because Kabila was sharing with them, well, you got Rwanda and Uganda being backed by the West trying to overthrow me. So the Africans responded, Pan-African solidarity. And they beat back the US and Europe-backed Kagame and Museveni, and wound up in a peace deal in 2002. They ended in 2002, peace deal in 2003. So by that time, unfortunately, Kabila was assassinated, 2001, most certainly by the Rwandans, by the West, because he didn't fit into the model that the Clinton administration was pushing for what they call the new breed of African leadership, right? The Renaissance leaders of Africa, the Pan-African leaders. It's kind of interesting today. Folks talk about Paul Kagame being a Pan-Africanist and on the continent, and we had to support him. He's a Pan-Africanist, and they talk about it not knowing that the first first imprint of Pan-Africanism put on Kagame was done by Bill Clinton, President of the United States. I highly encourage you to do a search on the internet for Entebbe Principles. When Clinton traveled to Africa in 1998, Entebbe came out with the Entebbe Principles, which grounded in neoliberalism, grounded in puppet leaders supporting the interests of the West. And he had the likes of Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda and Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia. There wasn't even a time that Afrique of Eritrea was in there, but he fell out with the Clinton administration. So it was Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State then, Susan Rice, the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, who put the stamp, new breed of African leaders, which incidentally, they all had certain characteristics among themselves. With each other, they had invaded other African countries. They had the blood of millions of Africans on their hands, and they ran authoritarian regimes in their respective countries. But even though these crimes that were being committed locally by these leaders, as long as the United States put a stamp on it, those local crimes can be cleansed internationally, because what the United States would do would be to run diplomatic and political interference. When the Kagames and the Musevenis were brought to book for the crimes that they committed against other Africans, right? So you have this 30-year war of aggression and plunder backed by the United States, right? Backed by the UK, backed by the European Union. And you have what we see today, right? Where this war of aggression, it ebbs and flows. Remember, 96 invasion, and there was a 98 invasion. 98 invasion triggered what the International Rescue Committee says the deadliest, and the United Nations says the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. That killed 5.4 million people from 1998 to 2007, right? And then you add the deaths, according to the UN, from 1996 to 1998. As a part of, you get over 6 million people who have perished. And that was the last time a mortality study was done. So you have the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, being spearheaded by US allies, where the United States is running diplomatic, political interference to protect them, where they roll out the red carpet. Paul Kagame can walk into the United States, go to any university, sit down with university presidents, present to students, even though he's got the blood of millions of Africans on his hands. But because he's got the backing of the empire, it cleanses those crimes. So what we see today in the Congo, right, is a part of a 3-decade-long process in its most recent iteration. Now, what is really important about this is really critical. Recall I've shared with you that the design of the Congo, right, which is for all intents and purposes, is still in the colonial state, right, the colonial legacy, not only in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the extracting of the resources, in terms of the lack of infrastructure, roads and rail and phone and electricity and water, you name it, right? Living a colonial existence, right? Not only in that hard colonial legacy, but also through the way in which people see the Congo, right? Remember, along with the hard colonial legacy, what I've just laid out, the infrastructure and the extraction, is also the view, the prism through which the world sees Africa. The colonial prism, the colonial view is still very much intact. And that colonial prism and that colonial view is Africa is the dark continent. And Congo, a la Joseph Conrad in his novella, is the heart of darkness. And what that means is that the people who are there, they're imbued with certain atavistic qualities, animalistic qualities that condemn them to perpetual violence, where they've always fought against each other. And the wars that we see are tribal wars. The development that we see is because they're not quite human. This is a colonial prison. So when 6 million people die there, right, and not in Europe, but in the heart of Africa, it doesn't generate any kind of response that would be commensurate with that tremendous loss of human life. Why? Because we already have prejudices. We're viewing Africa and Congo through a colonial prism where it's not worthy of inquiry, where death and rape and mayhem is normalized because, just like those doctors, if you read the book Medical Apartheid, black folks, Africans, they don't feel pain, right? So we can go up in the genital parts of women and do experiments on them for our own purposes, for our own advancement of science, right? It's that same white supremacist understanding that people bring when they look at the Congo, like people dying in the millions. Okay, that's normalized, that's fine, it's Africa, and we saw how it played out when Russia, invaded Ukraine. Europeans are like, this is happening in Europe and they're killing white people. So the reporters are like, this is not like Iraq or this is not like Africa, so we need to do something about this, right? This is a war in Europe in the 21st century. So part of our undertaking as quote unquote activists is to deconstruct and dismantle that colonial prism that we're all victims of, right? We're all victims of a white supremacist system. That's why you have this, even on the continent, you have people using bleaching cream and disfiguring themselves because they want to get as far away from Africa and their African selves as possible. So what the key thing though is, as we look at this colonial legacy and we look at our current day, what we see, recall I shared with you, Kwame Nkrumah, Ahmed Sékou Touré, Modibo Keïta, dispatching André Blouin, Félix Moumet, all to embrace and support the Congo because they saw Congo as indispensable to the future of the Pan-African project of the United States of Africa. This is a blueprint of the best that we've produced. Malcolm X, right? Almost always talked about the Congo, named one of his daughters after Lumumba, right? Said Lumumba was the greatest African to ever walk the continent. So the Pan-Africanists abroad, Pan-Africanists at home, embracing the Congo. Even the internationalists, right? Che Guevara in 1965 went to the Congo. You read Che's diaries. He said, Congo's challenge is a worldwide challenge. He said that the extent to which Congo is successful, right, is the same extent to which Africa will be successful. The extent to which Congo fails is the same as the extent to which Africa will fail. This is Che. So the Pan-Africanists, the internationalists, right, all rallying around the Congo. Now, contrast that to Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. They're ravaging the Congo. They're ravaging the Congo in the interests of the empire, in the interests of the West, right? And they've even fought each other on Congolese soil in the so-called 6-Day War in 2000, where Rwandan and Ugandan militaries fought each other on Congolese soil. You hear Kagame talking about, we're going into Congo to protect Tutsis or protect minorities. And what were you doing fighting Ugandan military in 2000 in Kisangani? The so-called 6-Day War that killed Congolese and injured thousands, right? So make no mistake about it. We have the blueprint. Are you gonna follow a blueprint laid out by Nkrumah and Sékou Touré and Ahmed, Modibo Keïta? Or are you gonna follow a blueprint laid out by Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni? Paul Kagame, who's at Davos. Paul Kagame, whose country is head of the Francophonie. The Francophonie that the Sahel states are saying that we're Abba with France. So here it is that you have West Africans who are fighting tooth and nail against France-Afrique, against Macron, against French interests. And then you have this person that says that he's a Pan-Africanist, right? But he's all up in the Francophonie. He's his former foreign minister, Louise Mushikiwabo. is a Secretary General of the Francophonie. He's all up in the British Commonwealth. He intentionally joined the British Commonwealth, all up in these colonial relics, right? So it's so vital for us to look at this. And when I say Paul Kagame, I'm talking about a particular type, like the Binza Boys type, right? Who serve interests of the West, right? The Blaise Compaoré type, right? Who is the HNIC in West Africa for France and the United States, right? Which a young Burkinabe and the mamas in Burkina Faso overthrew in 2014, right? That's a type that Kagame comes in. Kagame is not a Thomas Sankara. He's not that type of Pan-Africanist and liberation figure. He serves the interests of the West. He's buddies with Tony Blair. He's buddies with Bill Clinton. He's buddies with Sheldon Adelson, that billionaire Jewish guy who financed the presidential campaign of Newt Gingrich, right? Those are his buddies. He's buddies with Howard Buffett, right? The billionaire son of Warren Buffett, who invested $140 million in Rwanda and Eastern Congo, right? And said that he wouldn't do it if it wasn't for Paul Kagame. So he's firmly ensconced in the circles of the global elite, right? So looking at modern day Congo in a systemic way, in a structural way, it resolves and it answers a lot of the questions that we may have. So what we have today is this continued war of aggression, this 30-year of aggression, which I shared with you began in 1996. After the Southern African nations kicked Rwanda and Uganda out of Congo, what Rwanda and Uganda did was to continue to support militia groups. So today, Rwanda has control and command of the M23 that has captured territory almost the size of Rwanda. Rwanda has sent its soldiers into the Congo to occupy major cities in the east of the Congo, Bukavu and Goma, displacing millions. Just since January, up to 7,000 or 8,000 Congolese have perished as a result of this invasion. Right? So when we say to put pressure on Kagame, we're calling on Kagame's allies. We're saying that, you European Union, you're rewarding him. He's invading Congo. You're rewarding him with a critical minerals deal, right? We know he's an agent of yours. We understand that, right? Because he's sent his soldiers to Mozambique and Cabo Delgado to defend the interests of Total Energies. Total Energies has oil interests, natural gas interests in Mozambique. And Macron called on you to send your soldiers to defend those interests. And they gave you $20 million in 2023, 20 million euros, another 20 million euros in 2024. We know you serve the West and the global elite, right? We know when Netanyahu called on you to accept refugees that Israel didn't want in Israel, you said, send them to Rwanda. We'll take them and we'll negotiate a fee, right? So we're tight with Netanyahu. When Boris Johnson in the UK said, hey, we want to get rid of these asylees, we'll give you $200 million, Kagame, you said, yes, bring the refugees here, right? So here it is, he's complaining about refugees from the Congo in Rwanda, but he's accepting refugees from Israel or asylum seekers from Israel and was prepared to accept asylum seekers from the UK. So he serves the interests of the West, right? He's that type. So what we see today, and we call for pressure, we're saying to the United States, stop providing military support. Stop using the US tax dollars to support the killing of Congolese. Same to the UK, same to the European Union. Cut your deals. You're getting illicit minerals from Rwanda. Stop, right? So that's the effort that we're leading. One part of the effort is to call on Rwanda's allies, those who support Rwanda, those who Rwanda count on, the Rwandan government couldn't do what it's doing without their backing, to basically stop using our tax dollars to support the killing of Congolese. And this is not just a Congolese issue, because for each and every one of us, if there is a figure like Kagame and Museveni who are killing Africans to the tune of millions, we ought to be standing up and protesting. We ought to say, no, 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 you're not that's not in the interest of Africa. Be killing Africans. Nkrumah and Ghana didn't go into Congo to kill Africans. Sekou Touré didn't go into Congo to kill Africans. Modibo Keita didn't go into into Congo to kill, go into Congo to kill Africans. So you're sending your military into Congo to kill Africans, and that should outrage all of us, especially considering the centrality of Congo to the future of the African continent. And if we have a strong Congo, a stable Congo that's in the hands of a sovereign leadership and people, it's clear that's indispensable. First step for having a strong African continent, and by extension, an African world. So we operate on a syllogism: a strong Congo equals a strong Africa equals a strong African world. So it's in the interests of all of us, to be engaged. And as Fanon probably put it best in his work toward an African revolution, he said, let us not forget the fate of all of us is at stake in the Congo. So I'll leave you with that, with Fanon, that the fate of all of us, as Fanon said, is at stake in the Congo, and how we respond to the Congo determines the future, not only of the Congo, but of the African continent and the African world.
Do folks have any questions that you want to ask? Okay, cool.
Brother Maurice, thank you for the presentation. I just had a question about the differences in the struggles that are going on throughout the Congo based on region. Because you had mentioned that the M23 has taken over cities within the east. But you said earlier in your discussion that I believe it was the north has the more rainforest, the west has more of the city structure, and the south has the mining areas. So like, are there differences in the battle that's being waged within those areas?
Yeah, I may need to qualify this in terms of the South. It's been the industrial engine for the Congo itself. That's where you get the industrial mining. But you also have the mines in the east of the country. You have coltan mines, you have tin mines, you have diamonds, you have gold. So really the entire country is rich. It's just that the wealth is extracted differently in the east. In fact, there's a company called Alphamine. It's traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. It's located in a place near Walikali, and they had to shut the mining down. They mine tin. It's one of the largest tin mines in the world because of the M23 and the Rwandan soldiers capturing territory in the east of the Congo. They had to shut the mines down. The M23, they captured a coltan mine in a place called Rubaya, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, coltan mine in the world, and they've been extracting about $800,000 worth of coltan out of there each month, and which adds to the illicit trade in minerals out of the east that Rwanda and Uganda has been involved in. Rwanda, they've exported about over $1 billion of gold out of the Congo. The coltan continues to flow out through those areas. Of course, Uganda extracted gold, extracted timber, and right now the flow is going to the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, to Qatar. I think you saw recently that President Tshisekedi and President Kagame sat down with the Emir of Qatar to discuss peace in the Congo. And Arab states are becoming larger players, whether it's in the Congo or in Sudan. So that's a factor that we have to take into consideration now, that they are they represent the Arab elite, right? Who are now engaged in Africa, whether it's the gold that goes out to the Arab states, or the investments that they make in terms of land grabbing, acquiring land on the African continent. They are also a factor, or in the case of Sudan, where they support the RSF in Sudan. So we have to figure them into the equation now as well. But in the east of the country, that borders Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, it's very rich as well. It's just that it's not developed. That's where you find a large number of what they call artisanal and small scale miners, right? And that's where you find the militarization of the resources, in the sense that militia groups, armies from neighboring countries go in to control mines. Also, the Congolese military, they benefit from the riches as well in the east. So when you look at the natural resources in the Congo, the east of the Congo carries a certain dynamic that's particular to the east, and then the south carries a particular dynamic. In the south, in the Katanga region, the mining is predominantly industrialized. So that's where you find the Chinese companies. That's where you find the Indian companies, the Australian companies, the Kazakh companies, just the Canadian companies. So conflict is not a fundamental part. The conflict that we see in the east is not a fundamental part of the mining areas in the south of the country, right? You don't have militia groups roaming the south of the country. You do have some instability in the west, where you have different in the old Bandundu province, but it's not to the extent that you see in the east of the country, because the east of the country, really what it is, Museveni said a number of years ago, Congo is like a banana plantation. You go in and get what you want. Contrast this to Nkrumah, who said, Congo should serve as a capital of the United States of Africa. Just gives you a sense. I'm gonna keep driving that point home. What Pan-Africanists like Nkrumah and Touré, who are and Malcolm, said about the Congo and did in relation to the Congo, to what people are saying, these folks who they calling Pan-Africanists. I saw Professor Smalls make an argument for Kagame being a Pan-Africanist, and he should be challenged. And I hope to arm all of you to challenge him in a historical analysis. He was with Malcolm. Malcolm supported the Congo. So how does Kagame and Museveni match up to Malcolm's stance on the Congo or Nkrumah's stance on the Congo? But in any case, those are the differences that you see. Those the Museveni and Kagame, they believe Eastern Congo is their domain, and don't buy into the argument because of colonial borders and all of that. That's total nonsense. They're just using that as a rationale for having their way. Because really, if you're a Pan-Africanist and you want to contest colonial borders, really, and Nkrumah wanted to break down colonial borders, right? At the Organization of African Unity in 1963, the colonial borders remaining in place was a compromise, right, on the part of the Pan-Africanists. Because Pan-Africanists seeks to break down colonial borders, not to say, oh, you're part of the colonial borders was drawn in a way where you got our land, right? That's not the argument the Pan-Africanists make. They said these borders were imposed on us. We ultimately want to abolish them. We want a unified Africa. That's what Gaddafi was standing for, right? That's what he was on the cutting edge of a unified Africa, coming out of the African Union And then you had the conservative forces, and Museveni was one of them, right? You had Mbeki was another one, saying, no, we should do regional integration first and graduate to continental integration. And Gaddafi was saying, no, we want continental integration now. And guess what? I'm going to put my money behind it. The oil money, the gold money. I'm going to be the number one, supporter of the African Union, right? I'm going to organize in a way and use my goal to develop a currency, right? So Obama and Sarkozy had to get rid of him because Pan-Africanism is not in the interest of the West, right? So overthrew Gaddafi, right? So if we look at things systemically, we look at things structurally, then and not in terms of personalities, right? And that's why I keep mentioning Kagame as a type. He's a type that's not fundamentally different from Blaise Compaoré, right? In Burkina Faso, he's a type that's not fundamentally different from Alassane Ouattara, right? It's not a question of personalities. He's an agent. He's an agent of neocolonialism. And so is Museveni, if we look at the evidence and whose interests they serve. So yeah, that in terms of the conflict and the militia groups in different parts of the Congo, I hope that helps to answer the question a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Hey, Maurice, we got a few questions in the chat. So the first question is from Bob Morgan. He asks, how about China's involvement?
Yes. So, that's a really good question. From 2001 to 2002, the UN published 3 studies that looked at the illicit exploitation of the Congo. And they listed some 85 companies. If you go on our website, congoweek.org, there's a section that deals with flyers and fact sheets and all. You'll see the list of companies. 85 companies that they said violated Organization of Economic Community and Development, OECD, guidelines in their exploitation of Congo. And of the 85 companies, I think there may have been one Chinese company. And it wasn't even a mining company that was on that list. But you had companies from Europe, Canada, the US. You're in Ohio, right there in Cleveland. They had a company called the OM Group was on the list. You're right next door to Pennsylvania, the Blattner Group. I think they were on the list. Up there in Canada, they had Banro and Ashanti Gold, and they're just Barrick Gold. All these companies are on the list. So fast forward to today, 80% of the companies that deal in copper and cobalt are Chinese owned, right? And they're found in that industrialized part of the Congo that I talked to you about, in the old Katanga province. Right now they're like, they've been divided into Lualaba, Haute Katanga, Tanganyika, but Haute Katanga, Lualaba, the main provinces, right? So you have the Chinese dominating, right? Now, recall I shared with you, Congo was designed as an outpost for the extraction of natural resources. And that design hasn't fundamentally changed to this day. So the Chinese companies have come into that capitalist design to do business. And they may offer better deals, a better deal to the Congolese government, right? But we're still in that logic of extractivism and capitalism. So our focus is on the system and the destructive nature of the system and how it is that Africans can extricate themselves from that system. Because what we've seen, if we look at the Chinese, for example, there's this one of the largest copper mines in the world. It's called Tenke Fungurume. Tenke Fungurume. The United States Embassy, the U.S. Import-Export Bank, a number of politicians had mobilized, right, to ensure that Tenki Fungurume was owned by an American company. At the time, the American company was called Phelps Dodge. But they're out of Arizona with Senator John McCain and his wife, Cindy McCain. And they changed their name to Freeport McMoran. So they owned that Tenki Fungurume, which at one point, according to the Financial Times, I don't know how this is, but they reported that was one of the top protected sites for the U.S. in terms of terrorism. The Tenki Fungurume mine, copper mine, now it's owned by Freeport McMoran. In 2017, the company ran into debt issues. So they sold the mine. They sold the mine, the Tenki Fungurume, to a Chinese company called China Molybdenum, right? This is all happening above the heads of the Congolese people. The Congolese government, of course, and that local elite is involved. And New York Times even reported that Hunter Biden, a company that Hunter Biden owns, or his part ownership is in, was partly responsible for negotiating the deal between the American company and the Chinese company. So the mine went from an American company to a Chinese company. The condition of the people, the promises that were made around housing, around education, around health, were not fulfilled. We had a delegation in the Congo in February 2024 that was traveling from Kolwezi, the mining capital of the Congo, to Lubumbashi down south, and they get caught up in a dispute between small-scale miners and Tenki Fungurume. Rocks were flying, Tenki called in security forces, bullets, shots were fired, and miners got killed. So the issue is the system in place. And unfortunately, the Congolese, we believe, would have a chance to change and disrupt that system, working with the Chinese, based on what we see the Chinese doing with Indonesia. Indonesia is another key country when it comes to transitional minerals. They're one of the large, if not the large, they may be the largest producers of nickel in the world. And what the Indonesian government did, the leadership said that we're shutting down the nickel sector. You cannot extract raw nickel out of it. You can no longer extract raw nickel out of Indonesia. They reached out to the Chinese, so we'd like for you to work with us to have a vertically integrated system where value is added locally. And the Chinese have agreed, and they've been working with the Indonesians to add value locally for their nickel. Now, as the Indonesians said this, the European Union brought suit against the Indonesian government at the World Trade Organization, suing them because they said the nickel has to stay in the ground and value has to be added locally. Now, the Congolese government could do the same, but much like the Rwandan and Ugandan governments, they're neocolonial leaders, right? They're a product of a neocolonial system and haven't moved in the direction of Indonesia, for example, right? The Congolese elite benefit from the status quo. You have a situation where 70% of the Congolese live on less than $2.15 a day, while the elites make $20,000 a month just for being in parliament. So whether Congolese live or die, whether they're in abject poverty or flourish, the elite, their monies keep coming in. So they're vested in the system as well, and they're part of those forces that are arrayed against the Congolese people. You know, the multinational corporations, the neighboring countries, the foreign governments, the multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and its sister wing, the International Finance Corporation, right? And then, of course, you have the local elites. All of them form a coterie of actors that, through their policies and their interests, work to the detriment of the Congolese people. And that's why we're saying we have to rally a global constituency, because the Congolese people they're not just left to their own devices. They have these forces working against it, these global forces. And we think the antidote is the people of the world rallying to the side of the Congolese to combat these forces, right? The local elites, the neighboring countries, foreign governments, multilateral institutions, multinational corporations. So when we talk about China, US or China West competition, and it's not only for the Congo, but for Africa overall, where is Africa's interests, right? How does Africa serve its interests? And not so much whether you're in China's camp or the US camp, but how how do Africans serve their interests? Another example of this is that the European Union, the G7, and the United States, they developed what they call the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, PGII, which is their response to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment said, we're going to develop infrastructure locally so that value can be added locally, right? Like what China is doing in Indonesia. And the flagship initiative under this effort on the part of the G7 and the European Union and the United States is a corridor called the Lobito Corridor. President Biden went to Angola in December to oversee the Lobito Corridor. He was unfolding there. It's a corridor, it's a rail line that runs from Kolwezi in the heart of the mining district in the Congo out through Angola, the Lobito port, that ships minerals out faster and more efficiently than the traditional routes through either the Indian Ocean or Durban in South Africa or Walvis Bay in Namibia. And the first shipment was made in December of 2023 by a company called Ivanhoe Mines. And the shipment that was made on the rail line was done in partnership with a Chinese company. So the rail line is open, anyone can ship on it. But the thing is, the rail line is in the logic of the colonial system, that is taking resources from the interior and extracting it out. It's not a rail line that connects the country where people can move within the country, like from Kolwezi to Goma or Kolwezi to Kisangani or Kolwezi to Kinshasa by rail. No, it's from the mines to the port, which remains firmly embedded in that colonial structure.
We have another question from Emily Mark, saying, have there any U.S. Congress senators that have been drawing attention to what the U.S. has been doing to hurt the people of the Congo?
Over the years, there have been a few. Like when Cynthia McKinney was in Congress, she was an ardent supporter of the Congo, and I think it may have been in 2001. She held a hearing on the Congo that was remarkable in that it was a hearing that revealed the corporate actors behind the plunder of the Congo. We haven't seen such a hearing since in the U.S. Congress. Over the years, you've had I don't know why I keep forgetting her sister's name. She's now the mayor of Los Angeles, and I'll get her name. She served in the Congress. She was a supporter of the Congo, and you have Sarah Jacobs, who's in the Congress now, and she's particularly concerned about the workers and the miners at the bottom of the supply chain, because what you have in the U.S., there's been about three laws that have been passed, bills that have been passed into law in the U.S. that directly affect Congo and Africa overall, and deals with this transition, this so-called green energy transition. You have the CHIPS Act that was passed, the Infrastructure Act, and of late, the Inflation Reduction Act. And all of those acts, according to Carnegie Endowment for Peace, there's about 250 billion at least that's set aside to access critical minerals on the African continent. And you have folks, Congress people like Sarah Jacobs, who and her staff are concerned about, well, what are the standards? What are the environmental standards? What are the labor standards? What are the human rights standards? Are they commensurate to what we have in the U.S. when U.S. companies or or the U.S. government is going to be engaged in critical mineral deals, whether it's in the Congo, other parts of Africa, or in the global South overall. So you have those type of leaders who are working to, they're concerned about labor practices in the U.S., concerned about environmental situation in the U.S., and they like to make sure that those standards are applied in different parts of the world when the government, U.S. government enters into critical minerals deals or U.S. corporations are engaged.
Thank you for that comment. Maurice, we have a question here from Philip. This question, I'm pretty sure you kind of addressed it in the beginning of your presentation, but I feel we should circle back a little bit about it. It seems like people are really interested in this one. So what's the real story behind, from Philip, what is the real story behind Rwanda's involvement in Congo's conflicts, and how much of it is about security concerns versus economic interests?
Yeah. And by the way, I just looked up, it's Karen Bass is her name, who's the mayor of Los Angeles and was the member of Congress. Yeah, that's a really good question, and it takes some time to answer it. I think there are a few indicators that you can look at to get to the bottom of it in terms of security concerns. So I shared with you that Rwanda invaded the Congo in 1996 out of security concerns, because it said the group that participated in the genocide in Rwanda, they fled into the Congo, right? And Rwanda went after them, right? And in going after them, they overthrew, with Angola and Burundi and Uganda, they overthrew Mobutu. And Rwanda invaded again in 1998. I suppose they used security concerns as a rationale for invading again. And since at that time, they've supported militia groups in the Congo. So Rwanda has said to different leaders in the Congo, like Joseph Kabila, who led the Congo from 2006 to 2018, we still have security concerns, right, in the Congo. The Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. So in 2008 and 2009, Joseph Kabila said, okay, send your soldiers in. Let's go after the militia. And there was an operation called Umoja Wetu, right? That Rwandan soldiers go into the Congo, go after these groups. Now, these Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, in 2008, the UN said to Paul Kagame, give us a list of these forces folks that you say are security concern. And the UN at that time, the regional director, his name was Alan Doss. We have a video of it on our YouTube channel. He said that Rwanda wasn't serious because he gave the numbers that the UN had in terms of these forces. We had spoken to the Congressional Research Service. That's the research arm of the US Congress. And this was maybe 2009, 2010, where they said that these democratic forces do not represent Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, do not represent an existential threat to Rwanda. Today, the FDLR, in 2008, there maybe have been around 6,000 or so. Today, the FDLR are less than 1,000. They're about 1,000. This is like 30 years after the genocide in 1994, right? So that's the evidence, That's the evidence right there, that they do not represent an existential threat to Rwanda. Nyamwasa, a former comrade of Kagame, he gave an interview to South African television, where he shared with you he shared in the interview how the FDLR are captured and integrated into Rwandan society. And some of them even organized and sent to go back and fight in the Congo, right? This is somebody who was with Kagame from day one in his venture in Rwanda. And he and another gentleman by the name of Patrick Kariega, bolted. They left the country. They left Kagame. And Kagame vowed that he would hunt them down like dogs. He assassinated Patrick Kagame in 2013, Kariega in 2013. And Rudasingwa, who had given an interview to South African television, he survived assassination attempts from Kagame. So he's running a gangster operation in Rwanda that's backed by the West. I shared with you, if Rwanda had security concerns, you have to ask the question. Rwanda and Uganda went to war against each other in the Congo in 2000, in the Six-Day War. Was that war because of security concerns on the part of either Rwanda or Uganda? If they're going to war against each other, they're soldiers. Now, they're allies in the invasion of Congo in 96, allies in the invasion of Congo in 1998. And then in 2000, they go to war against each other. Were they going to war over security concerns? Or were they going to war over Congo's minerals, right? So the evidence suggests that they're more concerned about the minerals that come out of the Congo that they get to record as export gains, especially Rwanda. On their books, the coltan and the gold, that's being recorded on Rwanda's books as export gains for the country. That gives Rwanda favorable ratings when it goes to get loans on the international market for its bonds. Of course, it benefits Rwanda because it's getting, the minerals are going out through them. So we see, the United Nations in their studies, if you look at the charts, wish I had some charts here to show. If you go to look at on our website at friendsofthecongo.org, there's a resource section that has those studies from illegal exploitation of Congo. If you look on reports under our website, if you look at the charts since 1996, if you look at exports of timber, exports of gold, exports of coltan, they all skyrocket since the first invasion of the Congo. So it's benefiting, Rwanda and Uganda financially. Even there's a report called Africa Confidential. They published something in the fall of 2023, where they said that the reason for Rwanda's recent foray into the Congo, where in 2021 they flipped the switch on the M23, where the M23 got back into the Congo and captured a town called Bunagana, said that Uganda had entered into a deal with the Congo to build a road in through the Congo that would ultimately cut out Rwanda out of the trade routes. And they started building the road right around Bunagana, and that was the first city that was captured by Rwanda and M23. So they're suggesting that it was their economic interests, not just in the terms of the exploiting of the minerals, but in the trade routes. They did not want to see that road built that would cut them out where they weren't a part of that deal. Now, say everything that I said, right, you have an issue with. You say, yeah, Maurice, but they still have security concerns, right? You have to ask your question. Say everything I said is wrong, or you don't even agree with what I say. Then you have to ask yourself the question, if Rwanda has security concerns, right, is this the best way for them to address their security concerns, by occupying Eastern Congo that has displaced up to 5 million Congolese, that has resulted in, thousands of women being raped, children being decapitated, even in the city of Goma itself, when they captured the city, within the first, week, 3,000 people were killed. There was a prison break. 150 women were raped and burnt alive in the context of that invasion. You have to ask yourself, if Rwanda has security concerns, is it worth the death of millions of Congolese, millions of Africans, right? From 1996 to the present, half of those who have perished are children under the age of 5. Even if you fully agree with Rwanda and Rwanda has security concerns, then you have to answer the question, do those security concerns trump millions of African lives, hundreds of thousands of women being systematically raped in order to protect Rwanda's security concerns? At what price? How much more are you going to ask your fellow Africans to pay for the security concerns of Rwanda? How many more millions of Congolese have to perish? How many more children have to have their heads decapitated? How many more women have to be raped to address the security concerns of Paul Kagame and the Rwandan government? So I think in answering that question, you'll get a sense of where we actually need to go as Africans, whether we're in the Congo, in Rwanda, or in Columbus, Washington, D.C. These are African lives that are being lost, African women who are being raped, all in the name of security concerns for Rwanda, a country of 14 million people, right? So I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. At what price for the security concerns? If, even if we put aside all of the evidence that I've just laid out, we have to ask ourselves that question.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how other like non-state actors in the east of Congo have been responding to M23's expansion since January. I find it sometimes difficult to get like English language sources on that, and so I know that there's a variety of other groups in that region, and how have they been responding to that expansion? Yeah.
When you say non-state actors, what actors are those that you're referring to?
I know that there's actors like rebel groups affiliated with like the Mai Mai and the Islamic State and etc.
I see. So you're talking about violent actors. You're not necessarily talking about civil society.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the you talk about Islamic State, and I guess you're talking about the Allied Democratic Forces. The Congolese government has invited the Ugandan government, the Ugandan soldiers in operation, they call it Operation Shuja, to go after the ADF, right? You see other groups like Codeco, who have, they're in Ituri, and some of those actors have entered into alliance with the M23 and their political arm, the Congo River Alliance. So you've seen, of course, the Mai Mai that you talk about, they're now referred to as the Wazalendo, who have been working with the Congolese government to combat the M23 in Rwanda. And really the extent to which you see Congo is unified as a state today is a result of the Mai Mai, is a result of local resistance. Because part of the problem is not just a question of Rwanda, invading the Congo, but you also have a weak state and a self-absorbed leadership in Kinshasa. So the people have been cursed with a leader. I shouldn't say cursed. That's fetishizing it, because the leader that's in place right now, he's not the one that people chose in 2018, right? When he first got elected. So the weak leadership in Kinshasa, where the government hasn't been able to exercise authority over the state, and doesn't even seem willing to, is part of the problem. And then that leaves way for Rwanda and Uganda to have their say and influence in Eastern Congo. But it's the people who have resisted those incursions that have kept Congo in the as a unified state. So you get a lot of local resistance that we see in Eastern Congo. You've had it over the past 30 years, and that's what has kept Congo as a unified state to this day.
We got time for one more question.
Okay, this is from Desmond. Does the conflict in Mali and the mining there factor into any of this? I joined late. So the gold in iPhones, the lithium in Tesla batteries, minerals in the chips in the Microsoft products are all benefiting from the land, all the while directly and indirectly causing conflict in these nations, which borders are created through these colonial and capitalist systems.
And what was the central part of the question? The first.
Does the conflict in Mali and the mining there factor into any of this?
The conflict in Mali?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does it play a role in what's happening in the Congo?
Yes.
Okay. Is he referring to like the dispute between Barrick Gold and the Malian government? Is that where he's driving at?
I would assume.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, the thing about when it comes to resources, Congo's got so much, you know, that what happens in another African country doesn't necessarily weigh heavily in terms of resources on what's unfolding in the Congo in regard to the exploitation and the hyper exploitation, right? What is of probably greater interest is what's happening in the Sahel states and the model that they're laying down of Pan-African unity and the extent to which that can influence the Congolese masses. And it has, dating. I think one of the things we have to remember about the Sahel states, I highly recommend that people look at this study by the United Nations Development Fund called Soldiers and Guns. I think it's the same website, soldiersandguns.org. See if that comes up, soldiersandguns.org. And they surveyed and interviewed thousands of West Africans, right, about what's unfolding in West Africa, particularly as it relates to French influence and control of their money. And what we see, it's important what we see unfolding in West Africa is not a result of coups by strong men, right? What is underlying is resistance on the part of the people, right? Let's look at Ibrahim Traore, for example. You don't have an Ibrahim Traore today without a Ballet Citoyen and the movements in Burkina Faso, the people's movement that overthrew Blaise Compaoré in 2014, right? So what we've seen in West Africa, whether it's in Burkina Faso, whether it's in Niger, whether it's even in Senegal, are young people organizing, resisting the France-Afrique, questioning their leaders who are serving foreign interests, where you have people in the streets of Niger being interviewed and just average people, and they say, well, we don't see why we have uranium in our soil and France has electricity and we don't, right? Africans benefiting from their resources and wanting to change their conditions and recognizing that the leaders that have been quote unquote democratically elected or initiated constitutional coups are not serving their interests. That's at the foundation. In 2015, these young people who were organizing in West Africa connected with young Congolese to try and initiate a similar move in the Congo. They were shut down by the Congolese government. But those Pan-African ties between Congolese youth, West African youth, still very much in place. And that's important to note because in terms of solutions and prescriptions for changing the heart of the African continent, it's going to come from the people, those on the front lines, those in the Basanja coalition, those young people who are organizing in Kinshasa and other parts of the country. That's really where the prescriptions, the ultimate solutions are going to come from. There are things that people can do on the outside. They can provide platforms for frontline groups to tell their stories, to reach your networks and mobilize support for their efforts. Recall I shared with you about the colonialism and the wars and the dictatorships and the assassinations. What all that has worked to weaken local institutions. So the extent to which a solidarity movement can be engaged with local institutions to help strengthen those local institutions is the same extent to which we're going to see a free Congo and by extension a free Africa. And Congo is so key to the future of the continent. We're talking about, I know we talk a lot about the minerals. They say, well, $24 trillion worth of minerals, that has attracted the likes of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk is already invested in the Congo. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, their company, Cobalt Mining, they're looking to capture lithium mine in the Congo, if we're to believe the recent report from Bloomberg News. They're in negotiations. So you have all of these figures, the billionaire class, right, are either vested or looking to be vested in the Congo. So that's in minerals. But the Congo River, if you're into dams and building dams, the Inga Dam that Dave Chappelle mom, she's right there next to you guys in Ohio. Dr. Yvonne Sion went to the Congo at the invitation of Lumumba to work on the Inga Dam. That Inga Dam has the hydro capacity to provide electricity for all of Africa. It's providing South Africa with electricity right now, Southern Europe with electricity. The Italians went to Congo a number of years ago to see how they can be a part of a project to get electricity to Italy. So when we talk about energy, talking about food security, Congo has the agricultural capacity to feed 2 billion people, which is more than the population of the African continent. So this is what's at stake. If Congolese and Africans can control the energy, control the agriculture and maximize it, control their $24 trillion worth of mineral wealth, that's what it bodes for the future of Africa. That's not going to come about, through a boycott of Apple, for example, right, which is one of the prescriptions people are pushing, or even you using refurbished phones, right? We encourage people to use your phones to organize, to mobilize, strengthen local institutions, put pressure on these companies like Apple, sitting on $55 billion in cash, benefiting from Congo. That's about just a little less than the gross domestic product of Congo itself. Whatever they're extracting, benefits should be going to the people. So they should be shamed, they should be pressured. But make no mistake about it, boycotting them is not going to lead to a solution. As a strategy to have people mobilize and invest in that is not going to lead to a solution in the Congo. The current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, before he became Secretary General of the United Nations, he gave an interview to the Financial Times in 2008. And he said, let us not forget, the international community has systematically looted the Congo. That was his diagnosis, right? That the international community has systematically looted the Congo, which we agree with. He didn't say Apple. He didn't say the tech sector. He didn't say Tesla. He didn't say the auto sector. He didn't say the the jewelry sector. He said the international community has systematically looted the Congo. If that's the diagnosis, what is the prescription? We say the prescription is mobilizing the people of the world to be by the side of the Congolese people, as Lumumba articulated in his last letter to his wife, to support those who are on the front lines in the rainforest, those who are on the front lines in the conflict, those on the front lines in the cities, those that are on the front lines in the mining areas, for us to have a global movement in support of frontline organizations that are organizing to control the wealth of the Congo, to control the resources of the Congo, to control the land, not only for the benefit of Congolese, but for the benefit of Africans. So to have, if the problem is systemic and it's structural, then we have to have a systemic and structural response, right? You have the local elites who are in cahoots with the global elites. And Kagame's Tshisekedi is as much a part of the local elites that's tied and tethered to the global elites as Kagame is, right? It's just that they're having a dispute, but the people are the ones who are suffering. So this country, in the heart of the African continent, that sits at the nexus between two dominant phenomena of our time, the climate crisis on one hand, where it's a part of the second largest rainforest in the world, often referred to as the second lung of the world, after the Amazon, but sequesters more carbon than all of the tropical rainforests combined, the Amazon, Borneo, you name it, right? Home to the largest tropical peatlands the size of England, right? That's got carbon trapped in the soil that if it's released, will be to the equivalent of 20 years of pollution in the US from the burning of fossil fuels. This treasure in the heart of the African continent that we count on the Congolese people to protect the indigenous people, we need to be by their side, under that undertaking, in that undertaking. It's in our self-interest because protecting Congo's rainforest is vital to the future of the planet. And then we're saying that in order to protect the climate and mitigate the climate crisis, we have to make a transition, energy transition. Then we see Congo looming large because this energy transition is battery driven. And you don't have batteries that function the way they do without cobalt. And Congo produces 70% of the world's cobalt. And if you add up all of the countries in the world that produce cobalt, they don't equal what Congo produces. So you have Congo sitting at the nexus of the climate crisis and the energy transition. That should be sufficient enough for you to say, let's not normalize what's happening in the Congo. Let's not normalize hundreds of thousands of women being raped. Let's not normalize a system where an Israeli billionaire like Dan Gertler makes $200,000 a year, $200,000 a day in royalties, while the Congolese 70 million plus live on less than $2.15 a day. That's a colonial system. And we're saying to people, let's not normalize it. And we don't normalize it by talking about it, sharing information about it, organizing forums such as this, mobilizing resources, financial, material, intellectual resources to get to people on the front lines who are organizing to change this dynamic. So that's, I don't want to just leave with the tragedy and the history, but I want to talk about the potential agricultural and food security, energy potential, mineral potential, and the most important potential of them all, human potential, right? So those in the Basanja Coalition, and their allies, they're calling on you, each and every one of you, to be by their side, to support them, as they organize for a free Congo in the spirit of Lumumba. A free Congo means being free of rape, free of conflict, free of poverty, free of exploitation, right? That's what a free Congo means. And it means Congolese controlling the land, controlling the wealth, controlling their resources, controlling their means of production, controlling their affairs for the benefit of Congo in particular and Africa, at large. So that's why when Fanon said the fate of all of us is at stake in the Congo, when Che Guevara said this is the front lines of the colonial battle, what happened, Congo's problem is a world problem, though that still exists to this day. So we're talking about African liberation, talking about Black liberation. We have to take into the equation what's unfolding in the Congo. The epitome of Black liberation in the US in terms of articulating Black liberation certainly is Malcolm X. And you'd be hard pressed to find a speech Malcolm X gave where he didn't reference the Congo, where he didn't center the Congo and saw it as central to Black liberation. So that's the appeal that we're making to folks, that you have to take Congo into the equation, and there are concrete ways in which you can support movements on the front lines that are organizing for change, not only in the Congo, but Africa overall. And you go to freecongo.org, you immediately see ways in which you can get involved and engage and be a part of this this movement for change. And I shared with you that Booker T. Washington and George Washington Williams and William Shepard and Lucy Gant are all part of a movement in the dawn of the 20th century to take Congo away from King Leopold II. And they were successful in that endeavor. But the unfinished job is for Congo to get back into the hands of the Congolese. And that's our charge at the dawn of the 21st century. How can we be in solidarity with the Congolese people where they now control their land and their resources and their wealth? And that's what victory looks like, when Congolese, the masses, are the primary beneficiaries of their resources. And that's what we need to be organizing around. And that's how we can optimally be in solidarity with the Congolese people. And that is a path that's grounded in solidarity, but not charity. The charity path is not going to free Congo, right? The solidarity path will free Congo. So that's the appeal that we make to you, and we believe that each and every one of you can play a role in achieving a free and liberated Congo. We encourage you to go to freecongo.org to be a part of that movement and to be a part of that effort.
We want to thank you for that lovely presentation and answering our questions. We got about 15 people in this room in person, which is amazing.
How many do you have online? 30.
30 people throughout, like online.
Let's go.
Yeah, this is, we appreciate people like you who are educating people, doing the work to help our brothers and sisters in the Congo. Like our organization, People's Justice Project, is an organization that's dedicated to Black liberation and Black power and all of that. And so for you to do this is such an honor. And we appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it is freecongo.org. We just want to thank you, People's Justice Project, folks, Central Ohio for African liberation. Just want to thank you so much for having us in today to be with you. It's through groundings like this that we advance our cause. Not solely for free Congo, free Africa, but freedom for Africans globally, right? That we keep that in mind. And Malcolm probably put it best. When he was organizing around the Congo in the 1960s, and he started the organization for Afro-American unity. He was screening films on the Congo, talking about the Congo. And he was getting heat, from folks in the audience. Like, Malcolm, we catching hell right here in Harlem. Why should we be focused on the Congo? And he responded eloquently. He said basically to my brother who's talking out of the side of his mouth, as long as you think you got to get Mississippi straight before you get the Congo straight, you'll never get Mississippi straight. So what he was saying, in essence, is our struggle is a global one. Right, we have to fight for freedom and liberation in Columbus, in Southeast DC, in Jackson, Mississippi, in Kinshasa, DRC, in Khartoum, Sudan. It's a global struggle, and the extent to which we understand that that we're on a path for collective liberation is the same extent to which we'll be successful in our pursuit. So thank you so much for providing a platform for us to talk about the Congo in the context of African liberation. And African liberation is a worldwide pursuit. So Congo is a part of that journey. So thank you for including the Congo Solidarity Movement in that effort.
Well, we'll be definitely in contact after this, okay?
Yes, yes. So let's build from here.
No doubt.
All right.
Trust me. Got you. Stay strong.
Thank you all so much. Y'all be well.